Hare Krishna, time for the Wednesday evening Bhagavad Gita class. It is a little after 6 o'clock, and we're broadcasting from ISKCON of Silicon Valley, 1965 Latham Street, Mountain View, California. Do we have anyone online? Say Hari Bol. Anyway, Ramananda Saka is here, Srila Prabhupada is here, Lord Chaitanya and Sri Sri Radhavadana Mohan are here, and Sri Sri Lakshmi Sringadev are here, and there are people watching online too. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pri Rajakacharya Stottara Satta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Pri Rajakacharya Stottara Satta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Gangamai Jamunamai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol, Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthapa Today, Shri Bhakti Pran Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Bhajani, Nirvishesh, Nirvipaschi. Hare Krishna, welcome. Good to see you. Hare Krishna Kanka. Get a microphone. You can chime in. Before we start, I'm told that the Bhagavad Gita class goes on until 8 o'clock. It's a very long Bhagavad Gita class. I'm surprised. Usually they're like 45 minutes or something like this, but this is like a 2-hour session. So we might do some other things, chanting or other discussion. I was planning to speak on verse 326. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. We could read the verse in the purport. But before I start, is there any subject that anyone wants to talk about? Any verse that someone's been reading? Those of you online also, I think they can phone in, right? Or email in. If there's anything that somebody had on their mind in their private study or a verse that you want to discuss. What's your good name, sir? Manohar Lomesh. Hare Krishna. You come here regularly, or?
Yeah, I missed 2 Wednesdays. I was in the UK. I went to that Bradford temple.
Oh, nice. You can also use the microphone so people who are listening at home can hear. But Ramananda Saka will bring you the microphone. But I'm glad you were able to make it here. One announcement is I just heard today that Vyasaki, one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, a very expert kirtan leader, will be coming on a week from Friday to this temple to lead a kirtan program. And we'll advertise it, and we hope that a lot of people will come, and it will be very enlivening kirtan.
So next Friday.
Not this coming Friday.
Yeah.
So today's the 11th, so
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days. So Friday the 20th of March. This Friday is Friday the 13th.
I usually come on Wednesdays. Maybe I will try on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be good if you come that Friday the 20th. That would be good.
With his wife, Kishori.
With his
expert. She's probably the best cartel player I've ever seen.
With his wife, Kishori, you have to speak in the microphone. She's the best cartel player Kanka has ever seen. All right, so let's begin with Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, entitled, who knows the title of the chapter? Kanka, do you know? Chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga. And verse number 26.
I knew that, I just couldn't remember.
Okay. We're all getting older and we can't always remember things. In Kali Yuga, we have bad memories. It says so in the Shastra, and we see practically it's true. Oh, actually, speaking of which, I meant verse 27, because verse 26, I had a bad memory. Verse 26 is, Nabuddhi pedang janayed agyanang karma sanginam joshayat sarva karmani vidvan yuktak samacharam. We can read that one too. All right, why don't we read verse 26 and then we'll also read verse 27 and maybe a few more verses because it's a long class. So if it's up on the board, everybody please repeat. Na. Oh, he went up to 27 already. I'm sorry, I'm changing it up on you. Na buddhi pedang janayet agyanang karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vidvan yuktaha samacharan nabuddhi pedang janayet agyanang karma sanginam. All right, let's take it one line at a time. Nabuddhi pedang janayet.
Nabuddhi bhedam janayet.
Nabuddhi pedang janayet.
Nabuddhi bhedam janayet.
Agyanang karma sanginam.
Agyanam karma sanghinam.
Agyanang karma sanginam.
Agyanam karma sanghinam.
Joshayet sarva karmani.
Joshayet sarva karmani.
Vidvan yuktak samacharan.
Vidvan yukta samacharan.
Nabuddhi bedang janayed.
Nabuddhi bhedam janayet.
Agyanang karma sanginam.
Agyanam karma sanghinam.
Joshayet sarva karmani.
Joshayet sarva karmani.
Vidvan yuktak samacharan.
Vidvan yukta samacharan.
Others? Nabuddhi bedang janayet. Agyanang karma sanginam. Joshayet sarva karmani. Vidvan yuktak samacharan. Anyone else? Nabuddhi bedang janayet. Agyanang karma sanginam. Joshayet sarva karmani. Vidvan yuktak samacharan. Word meanings. No, did you want to try? Nabuddhi bhedang janayed. Ajnanam karma sanginam. Joshayet sarva karmani. Vidvan yuktaha samacharan. Word meanings. Na, not. Buddhi bhedang. Disruption of intelligence.
Disruption of intelligence.
Janayet. He should cause. Ajnanam. Ajnanam. Of the foolish. Karma sanginam. Who are attached to fruit of work. Joshayet. He should dovetail. Sarva. All. Karmani. Work. Vidvan. A learned person. Yuktaha. Engaged. Samacharan. Practicing. Translation. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. Please repeat. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men, attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work.
A learned person should not induce them to stop.
Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion,
Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion,
he should engage them in all sorts of activities
he should engage them in all sorts of activities
for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness.
for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness.
Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Vedaischa sarvaya raham eva vedyaha. That is the end of all Vedic rituals. All rituals, all performances of sacrifices, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. But though fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. The learned Krishna-conscious person may act in such a way that the ignorant person working for sense gratification may learn how to act and how to behave. Although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna-conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupang Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So Arjuna, at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, was in a very distressed condition, very morose. He was crying. Practically, he couldn't even hold on to his bow. It was slipping from his hand. And he didn't know which course to take. He couldn't take a step in any direction. On the one hand, he was convinced that fighting the battle of Kurukshetra he was between the two armies. He had asked Krishna to draw him in his chariot between the two armies, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye, and there looking at his friends and relatives on the other side who were there to fight with him, Kshatriyas who were sworn to fight to the death, including his guru, Dronacharya, his teacher, who was a very beloved relationship. Drona had disclosed to him all the military, martial arts, and Arjuna was his favorite pupil. And Bhishma Dev, who raised him as the grandsire, him and his brothers along with his cousins. And of course his cousins were there, Duryodhana and all his brothers, 99 other brothers. And their allies, so many allies. Kripacharya was there too on the other side, another guru. And Arjuna was seeing that all considerations of what would be good, according to his conception of what would be good, would not be served by the battle. And he gave many arguments from his own point of view of why he shouldn't fight the battle. Sometimes, especially for those, we're preaching in the Western countries, people are not familiar with Mahabharata, they're not familiar with the whole Hare Krishna, the whole history leading up to the battle, and the character of the Pandavas and the character of their cousins, and the attempts that were made to resolve the difference by diplomacy and so forth, and all the injustices that were heaped on the Pandavas. One who knows the Mahabharata, knows all these things, is ready for Arjuna, the hero, to be victorious in the battle and win. But when we speak to Western people and they're unfamiliar with Bhagavad Gita and they don't know the story behind it, it surprises them because they think that a religious book should teach nonviolence and that warfare is wrong, and they expect that Arjuna's arguments sound like very good arguments. It's sinful to kill your superiors, society will be disturbed, when all the heroes are killed in the battle, then the women will be married by unqualified men and will create a bad population. Society will go to hell. Hare Krishna. Sin will be incurred and future life will be bleak if you do bad acts. So many different arguments were there. And then Arjuna turns to Krishna, his friend, who's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is another strange thing in Vedic literature, in Mahabharata, because I think to the Western mind we're expecting that, you know, if God is in a book, a novel, a story, a history, then He's going to be the main character. Westerners are familiar with the Gospels, which is the story of the life and teachings of Jesus, and it's, you know, He's the main character. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna is the main character, and in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is the guru and the main teacher, speaking more than anyone else, teaching. But in Mahabharata, it just so happens that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a friend of the Pandavas, and he's in the book, but it's not all about him. It's the story of his cousins, the Pandavas, and their family. So Krishna's there, and in that disturbed condition, because not fighting would be a disaster. Arjuna would just abandon his family, his brothers, and abandon the field. He's a hero, a great warrior, and he would just abandon the fight. But Arjuna is thinking that fighting itself is also so wrong from his own calculations that fighting also would be a disaster. And so he can't take a step in either direction, and he's thinking that it would probably be better just to sit down and let them kill him, let the opponents kill him, or go to the forest and become a hermit beggar, rather than engaging in what he saw as inauspicious activities. And Krishna's there explaining to him why he shouldn't be discouraged in that way, but he should carry on with his duty of fighting, even though it appears troublesome to him. And that actually this particular combat was God's will and Krishna's will. Krishna wanted Arjuna to be victorious in the battle and get the glory from winning the battle. He begins to explain what's wrong with Arjuna's arguments and why Arjuna is thinking in the wrong way. And the beginning of the explanation is that he's forgetting the essential thing, that what are we? We're not these material bodies. We're eternal spirit souls. We're embodied souls. The body is undergoing changes from childhood to youth to old age, but the soul is not changing. Anything that's real, substantial in reality, philosophy, we should understand that that which is real has no cessation. It's eternal, it doesn't change. And the things that are temporary and changing are therefore, in a certain sense, illusory. And that one should be tolerant. Our situation in this life is one in which we have miseries. And trying to solve the miseries by our material activity, material calculations and concoctions and ideas doesn't get us free, but actually gets us further implicated. And no one has ever solved the problems of material life by material solutions. Yes, we can learn to stop certain diseases by vaccinations, or we can learn to make some labor-saving devices, although sometimes we find even we make machines that solve one problem and then they create other problems. Global warming now, everyone is talking about. We've got all these machines that are running on burning all the oil in the earth. The oil is running out, and the fumes from the burning, the carbon dioxide is going into the air, so people are all so you think we're solving problems, but actually nobody's become happy that way. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that we should see things from the spiritual perspective, and we should recognize that our problems are coming just like our happiness is coming, and the happiness and distress come from our own mental concoction. And because we have acquired a certain kind of body because of our past karma, and we should tolerate the changing, vicissitudes of happiness and distress, and look for the deeper reality, the spiritual reality. So Krishna is describing all that to Arjuna, and he describes to him what he calls Buddhi Yoga in the second chapter, that one should become, if you have a Sayatmaka Buddhi, that one should become one-pointed in one's attention. Yoga means to concentrate the mind on a single point. Arjuna was already famous for being an expert archer. It takes a lot of concentration, right? There's a famous story where Drona was teaching him to shoot, and he said, he wanted them to shoot the eye of a bird, and all the other students were missing. And he would ask them, "What do you see?" "I see the branch, I see the bird on the branch," and so forth. And when Arjuna pierced the bird target, it wasn't an actual living bird, it was a target with a bird's eye. Or they say bullseye in the target, but it was a bird's eye. So he said, "What do you see?" And Arjuna said, "I only see the eye. I don't see the bird, I don't see the branch, I don't see the sky." His focus was that straight. So in yoga, one focuses the intention. All cell phones should be turned off. And Hare Krishna. And this Vedic literature is very vast. And it's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that there was originally one Veda, but that in the beginning of Kali Yuga, the son of Parashara Muni, Vedavyas, he edited the Vedas. He divided it into 4 different sections, 4 different Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Vedas. And he entrusted the different portions to different sages, so they and their disciples would keep them alive. The Vedas were studied as oral traditions. They weren't written down, but originally the sages could remember everything. So in Kali Yuga they couldn't remember all 4 of them, but they could learn to memorize still a very vast section of things. And the Vedas describe different rituals. There are different hymns and sacrifices which are performed with those hymns, satisfy the different agents of Krishna, the different parts of his body, that is, the various demigods in the universe. The universe is a person, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, but he has entrusted different functions, universal functions, to different devas, like Indra and Chandra and Surya and so forth. And the Vedas prescribe a way of life also, a social system, an economic system, everything. But human civilization is meant to do something. It's not just a way to, like the utilitarian economists say that, well, everybody's an individual, a rational individual, and they should decide what their own best interest is according to their own lights, and whatever makes them happy is good. And if we could calculate the sum of all happiness, whatever produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people is like a mathematical equation, and that's what we should do. But actually that whole theory is nonsense. It's because most of the people don't know what their real self-interest is. And there's a lot greater happiness. Most people think that they'll become happy by material solutions. But there's a much greater happiness that they could attain by living more simply, but spending time meditating and studying Bhagavad Gita and understanding Krishna's instructions, being a yogi. Hare Krishna. This is the real path to happiness. So there's really a goal for human society, and it's not to increase material happiness, but it's actually to satisfy Krishna. If we make Krishna happy, automatically we become happy. Just like if we decorate our face, the reflection in the mirror also is decorated. We don't have to write on the mirror, we write on our face. So we don't have to please our material body, we have to please Krishna, and then also we will automatically be satisfied and happy. So the Vedic system is there, and it's so arranged that people, according to whatever actual condition they're in, according to their past activities and their different mentalities and attachments and the kind of bodies they have and the kind of tastes they have, the kind of senses they have and the kind of sentiments they have, they can be properly engaged. And the universe is properly designed so that it all works very naturally. But the goal of the whole thing should be to please Krishna. So, Arjuna asks at the beginning of the 3rd chapter, which is the chapter we're now reading from, all right, you've told me that we're not these bodies, we're spirit souls, and that we should practice yoga and fix our mind in one point of attention, control all our senses, not be motivated by desires. Okay, I understand that, but then why do you want me to fight the battle? Shouldn't I? It seems like what you're saying is I should retire and sit down and live in the forest and, come what may, concentrate my mind in spiritual knowledge. Arjuna actually said that I think your instructions are equivocal. Vyamashrena vakina buddhing mohaya siva me. It's bewildering my mind, that you seem to be saying two different things. The conclusion would be different. And so Arjuna said, just tell me exactly what's best for me. What's one thing that you're saying? And Arjuna says, no, you've understood correctly that the goal is to become a perfect yogi. But there are different ways to do that. And different people have different proclivities. Lokesmin dvividha nishta pura prokta mayanikha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yogina. Krishna says that some people are inclined to retire from active life and ponder philosophical truth, and other people are inclined to engage in acts of devotional service. And that's called karma yoga, to actually work for the satisfaction of God rather than becoming inactive and contemplating. And that actually just becoming inactive, na karma namanadam pannaish karmyang purushošnute na cha sanyasanadeva siddhing samadhikachati. That just by becoming inactive, one doesn't become perfect, actually. And just by renouncing work, one doesn't become perfect. And besides, everyone has to work. We can't just stop acting. Even if we tried to stop, if we stop breathing for a couple of minutes, we'll pass out. Because material nature is engaging us and forcing us to move, forcing us to breathe, forcing us to eat, forcing us to be motivated to do different things. And it's forcing us to go get a job and we get married and have a family and so forth. So we should do these in accordance, Krishna said. We should do these in accordance with the injunctions of the scriptures to regulate our senses. It's much better to regulate our senses rather than to try to pretend to be inactive when we're not qualified to do that. Otherwise we become mityacharaksa uchite. We become pretenders, false people. If we try to restrain our senses, but our mind is still thinking about material enjoyment, then we're just fooling ourselves. And who are we trying to fool? And we're not being honest. Prabhupada writes in the purport, better to be an honest street sweeper than a charlatan yogi. So, the mind is also a covering. When Krishna was explaining Sankhya in the second chapter, he was saying that, and he explains elsewhere throughout the Bhagavad Gita, that the soul is not just different from the material body, but it's also different from the subtle body. The mind, the intelligence, the impressions, sense impressions, desires, sankalpa, vikalpa, the mental duality of I'm going to take this and I'm not going to take that, let me do this now, let me do that. These are all temporary things, and therefore they're material. They're part of material nature. It's a different way of thinking about nature from the way physicists and chemists think about nature, but it's a very philosophically sound system. It's perfect, actually. Everything in Krishna consciousness is crystal clear and scientific. Srila Prabhupada would say this is a science. What did he mean by this is a science? He didn't mean it's based on a method of hypothesis and experimentation and empirical observation. It's not that scientific method as we learned what scientific method is in school, but it gives crystal clear, absolute factual knowledge of these subjects. Sometimes people find devotees, I've heard people say that, oh, devotees are very arrogant because they're used to, devotees aren't arrogant, they're humble and they're very sincere, but they're used to, in academic discourse, everyone's used to saying, it might not be this, it might not be that, I don't know, but these people say this and those people say that, and I'm a neutral observer and I don't have any beliefs or I'm not sure of anything. That's kind of a safe predilection approach. But Srila Prabhupada was... Oh, we have 30 people watching on the internet, I've just been told. So please, anyone who has any questions, also any of you here in the audience, if you have any questions, or because we have a 2-hour class, we've still got over an hour to go. You can raise your hand and stop me at any time, or if raise anything. But Srila Prabhupada was very convinced, right? It wasn't that he was thinking maybe it's like this or maybe it's like that. He was absolutely convinced that the words of Srimad Bhagavatam were authoritative and factual. And it wasn't that he was just convinced by, sort of working himself up into I believe it really hard. It was that he could see it with direct realization. He could see it practically, how it is so. And so Arjuna was asking, why don't I just stop doing everything if you say to practice yoga is enough? Krishna's saying, well, one kind of yoga is active and one kind of yoga is inactive. And actually, the world is designed to go on. For most people, to try to become inactive is not going to be successful. But it's better that they learn to do their duties, their active duties, and but to do them with realization and making them a sacrifice to Krishna. Madarpanam, Krishna says in chapter 9, Tat Kurushva Madarpanam. Because if we're not this body, then what are the actions of the body? If you say, well, I'm not this body, so I shouldn't act, why not act? Actually, you shouldn't stop acting either. You don't have any reason to stop acting. You should act according to the prescription, the duties that are inherent in your situation, but you shouldn't have the mentality of thinking that you are going to enjoy sense gratification as the result of your actions. You should actually act while thinking, I'm not this body, my senses are interacting, nature is moving my body in this way, but I'm really a servant of Krishna, and whatever I do, I'm doing under regulation, according to the spiritual master, according to the scriptures, in order to please Krishna. And so these are some of the teachings that Krishna is explaining. So in this verse, Krishna is saying that we have to act, and that people will follow whatever great men do. Right? Whatever the heroes, whatever the advertisers know this, right? They get some celebrity athlete or a music star, a movie star, something like that, and they say, I drink this brand of orange juice or whatever, and because I eat this breakfast cereal. Because they know that people will want to follow and do the same, drive the same car that so-and-so actor, what was his name? The McConaughey, right? He did this Lincoln commercial everybody was making fun of. He's talking about, I drove Lincoln before I was famous, whatever. Because people will go buy that car and spend a lot of money because they want to identify themselves as the kind of person that their favorite actor is. So, so Krishna is saying, even if you can just sit still and chant Hare Krishna all day, if you do that, other people will imitate that even though they can't. Krishna says, I don't have to do anything. There's no work prescribed for me. I'm not required to do anything. Name partasti kartavyang trishu lokeshu kinchana, in the 3 worlds. Non-avaptam, avaptavyam. Varta eva chakarmani, but I'm still working. Krishna's working. Krishna's there. He's a prince in the Yadu dynasty. He's driving the chariot of Arjuna. He's giving charity to brahmanas. He's going every day to the assembly house, Sudharma, and he's governing his district, Mathura, then Dwarka. He's governing Dwarka according to the welfare of the people and making sure that justice is done and so forth. Why is he doing all those things? If he's God, he could just stay up in the sky and accept everybody's offerings. But he's actually setting a good example for people of dharma, of how people should behave according to their position in society. Everyone should do their proper work. So Krishna is telling Arjuna in this verse that we should not, even if we don't have to work, most of us do, but it's better that we work in Krishna consciousness than to go off and chant in a secluded place in the forest, because we don't want people to imitate that who aren't qualified. Rather, we want to properly engage people in a way that's just appropriate to their own mentality and their own situation in life. And for most people, they are blind to the importance of Krishna consciousness. They think it's just a fairy tale, fantasy, spiritual enlightenment. That's not very real, but there are people that are hungry, there are people that are suffering, there's wars, we've got to do something to stop the wars. There's, they have nationalistic goals or, different humanistic goals and so forth. So that's okay. You're not going to be able to change everybody right away. The devotees are more merciful. They try to go out and tell people about Krishna consciousness, but not everybody's going to get that. But if you can get them somehow attracted to chanting, attracted to the devotees, attracted somehow, and let them go on engaging in family life. You don't have to try to make everyone become a sannyasi. No one's going to become a sannyasi. Very few people are going to become a sannyasi, totally dedicated. So this is how Krishna is teaching to Arjuna. So unless there's any questions, I was intending to speak about the next verse, verse 27, but because I had thought it was wrong, I read verse 26 first. But let's have a little discussion. If anybody, I know there's 30 people online, and we have also 8 people here. And if anyone has anything they want to talk about, yes, Prabhu, get the microphone.
I just have a comment, and maybe you can refine that. So as you said, the only thing which is permanent is the soul, because anything which is permanent and real, so anything which is real, basically it doesn't change in the dimensions of time and space. Mm-hmm. No, but and as you've explained, and is known that body is also not real, the material world is also not real. Nothing is actually real, right? But
in a way it's not real. There's another way in which it's real. I'll explain that later, but go ahead.
The point is that using that knowledge, everything becomes unreal, right? So, but the reason that we still suffer, even having that knowledge, is because of the dimensions, because life is limited to 100 years or 50 years, and the whole material world is limited to so many billions of years, right?
We suffer because we identify with our body and our senses as if that's really who we are. That's called false ego. But that's not really who we are. We have a different identity somewhere else that we don't know about right now. Right. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
The point is that that's the time dimension is so huge. Because we are not able to train ourselves, this is lasting for billions of years. Mm-hmm. and you're and honestly, it's not possible to train, even by chanting 200 years of if I keep chanting for 200 years, I'm just conjecturing that maybe still it won't be possible. Suppose my life was extended to another 100 years, So I'm not trying to kind of argue against it, but I'm just trying to kind of illustrate a possible kind of fallacy in this impracticality of this whole the not the verse, but just the situation of real versus unreal, right?
Right.
And as you rightly pointed out,
so we say it's not real, but when we stub our toe, it still hurts, right?
As you rightly pointed out, because we identify with unreal things, reason we suffer. Unreal things are many things, as your body, so many things, jobs, so many things, mm-hmm. right? And that's how we get trapped. I'm just kind of I don't know the answer, but and it's not a question either, but I'm just kind of, this is how the situation is right?
Well, it's a good segue into the next verse, because we'll talk about nature. What is nature? Because actually we say it's not real, but there's a way in which it's real. And what did I mean by that? Because it's really connected to Krishna. We are Krishna's energy, and the world around us is Krishna's energy, and Krishna himself is the source of these energies, and he's real. And so this is explained in this chapter 7, that Krishna says that there's material elements in the world, fire, water, air, earth, ether, and also mind, intelligence, and ego. They're not just separate things out there, they're really manifestations coming from Krishna. And in that sense, they are real. But we're perceiving them in an unreal way. We're thinking them to be something they're not. We're thinking them to be independent from Krishna. We're thinking them to be our own body, to be ourself, and the things, the elements in the world around us to be things that we can own, possess, and enjoy. And that's not what they are. They're all Krishnas. We're Krishnas, our bodies are Krishnas, our minds are Krishnas, and all the things of the world are Krishnas. And when we see it in that way and we offer everything to Krishna, then we're seeing things on the platform of its actual reality. And that reality is eternal. So there's relativity in time, in the sense that there is absolute time. That's described in Srimad Bhagavatam, that the amount of time it takes for a laser beam of light to cross over the smallest particle of matter is the smallest amount of time. And the biggest amount of time is the lifetime of the universe. That's the biggest amount of time. Lord Brahma lives for 100 years, but his 1 year is vast, vast eons of our time. He actually lives for 311 trillion years. So he lives for 100 years, so you can figure that 3.11 trillion years is one of his years. So these are like geological or astronomical lengths of time, even from the perspective of modern science. The space is not the same. The description in Srimad Bhagavatam of the size of the universe is much smaller than the modern scientific description, and also the description of the size of the smallest particle, the atom. What's the atom in the description of Srimad Bhagavatam is much bigger than the kind of atoms that our chemistry teaches us about, our mundane chemistry. But at any rate, there's absolute time, that is, there's a small amount of time, and you could add from that amount of time for light to cross one atom, Vedic atom, then so many of those put together becomes one amount of time, and then more of those put together. It's smaller than a nanosecond, much smaller than you can imagine whatever they say, picosecond, or now they're, in computer science, they're having to deal with these very, very small amounts of time. But Vedic literature actually already dealt with time smaller than that even. But when you add them all together, you get up into the realm of time that we experience. A lava is like an 11th of a second, and so forth. A muhurta is a period of time that's almost 3 hours long, or 2.5 hours, something like that. And that's absolute time. But relative time is that we have, in our experience of a lifetime of 100 years, a sense that that's an ordinary time. A bug may be born and die in the same day. Born, mate, lay eggs or whatever, and die in the same one day. One of our days is his whole lifespan. And similarly, for the demigods, the administrative demigods in Swargaloka, 1 year of our time is a day and a night of theirs. 6 months is one of their days, and the other 6 months is one of their nights. And for Lord Brahma, a whole Divya Yuga, it's like 4,320,000 years. There's 1,000 of them in one of his days, and 1,000. His night is the same length of time. So for him, it seems like one day, where for us it would seem like some whole gigantic, inconceivably long period of time. That the history that we know of, written history of human civilization that we think of as going back, about 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 years at most, or not much longer than that, is really for Lord Brahma hardly a blink of an eye, a moment, very much smaller time period than his day. Yes, Kanka.
So the reality of the material world isn't that it's an illusory energy, but it's temporary energy. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining that to Arjuna, that if you just work, just like an actor on a stage, if you just do what you're supposed to do, then that will become perfect, because it's already actually done. And he showed Arjuna how it was already done when he showed him the universal form, which is in the previous chapter.
In the 11th chapter.
In the 11th chapter. And so as we work our daily lives, we just need to do the best we can and remember that we're actors on a stage and everything is temporary. It's not just like a devastating event can throw someone into depression, but really if you get the reality check and you remember, oh yeah, these dark clouds will pass and things will change, because this is always changing.
It seems devastating to us because we're identifying with our body. It's not that the material energy itself is temporary, it's that the shapes and forms and the material events that we think of as significant are just different combinations of material energy. So our material body, which we're taking to be all in all, and we're thinking that when my life is over, then everything is finished, that's only one combination. These are, Prahlad Maharaj told his classmates about all these things and what he learned while he was in the womb of his mother, that things are assembled together for a short time and then they dissipate. And we're thinking that during this time that it's that this is the important thing. So when we're devastated by things happening, somebody, our close friend, is dying or died, or we found out that someone stole all our money from our bank account, or our house burned down in a fire, or an earthquake, a mudslide fell on it or something. Most people, these are very traumatic, shocking events. But for a devotee whose only intention is to please Krishna, and who's always thinking that I'm not this body, they actually are not very significant events. They're just, because we have a connection to something that's going on that's transcendental, that's beyond time and space. We have a happiness in a relationship there. And so it's true that a yogi can feel pain from his senses and think, oh, my senses are registering pain now. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't feel pain, but it doesn't disturb his happiness. Guru napi vichalyate, Krishna says in chapter 6, that when one is actually in the state of samadhi, that even the most difficult trying circumstances can't disturb one's happiness from experiencing with spiritual senses the reality of Krishna, the relationship of Krishna. But I don't know if I completely addressed your question, which was, you said that you were like making a counter-argument. I thought it was a good lead-in to the next verse, which says that it really is nature. We're really in nature. Yeah, Kanka.
Oh, one of the things that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us was this chanting of Hare Krishna, which cleans the heart so that we can understand the transcendental knowledge that Krishna is speaking to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. So it's so wonderful, and it's a process of yoga, bhakti yoga, that the more we chant, the more we're going to understand transcendental knowledge.
That's true. Other people who don't chant, they may read Bhagavad Gita and get nothing out of it. But by chanting, it all becomes crystal clear. It really does become crystal clear.
Lord Chaitanya said it's a special benediction that's given in the age of Kali. And even demigods want to take birth here so that they can perform this fast process of returning back to Godhead. Because he came in the Kali Yuga, it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, so that people could go back to Godhead. Because not enough souls were returning, they were keeping stuck on the wheel of samsara. So now, just by this simple process, and Prabhupada used to always remember the cartoon. The woman would be in the rocking chair, and the man would be in the rocking chair, and she would say, chant, chant, chant. And the man would say, can't, can't, can't. So it's a simple process, and if we just try to practice it every day, no matter what, there's no hard and fast rules for chanting. We can start to understand the temporary nature of the illusory energy, and these verses that are so wonderful. In fact, when you were reading this verse, I was remembering the story about the wives of the Brahmins. And the Brahmins were so stuck in their ritualistic activities and their knowledge and everything. But when it came to Krishna and Balaram asking for food, and they were hungry, the wives immediately said, oh yes, let's go, and we will give them food, because the Brahmins denied that. They weren't understanding this simplicity.
Mm-hmm. So how does that relate to this verse? I was thinking about that in this verse, that there's a controversy within ISKCON sometimes about us doing things like providing meals programs to help children so they can go to school, and providing hospitals and cataract surgeries and things like that, because people have to do something, and so we're doing these things. But there's a precedent that other times great devotees like Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta refuse to engage their disciples in what mundane people would think. This is good, you're helping the poor people, there's been a flood and there's been a disaster, why not, we'll give you money and you can make prasadam and serve it to people. And they said, no, it's not our business, we're chanting and teaching people Bhagavad Gita, we're not going to do it. Sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't, but it becomes a question. And how that relates to this verse that Krishna is saying, and there's another verse, here, let's read. I was going to read 27, but before I do, let me just read you this purport. 29. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached, but the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Purport: persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness, and are full of material designations. This body is a gift of the material nature, and one who is too much attached to the bodily consciousness is called manda, or a lazy person without understanding of spirit soul. Ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship, the land in which the body is obtained as their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to be ends in themselves. There's a verse that Prabhupada was fond of quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Dehatma buddhi kunupe tridhatuke swadhi kalatradishu bhoma ijyati yatirtha buddhi salile nakarhachit janeshu abhigyeshu sa eva go kara. Thank you. The person who accepts his body, which is just like a bag made of the three doshas, bile, mucus, and air, as himself, and he accepts the place of his birth as worshipable. Oh, I'm an American, rah, rah, we're the best, I'm Indian, I'm Moldovan, we have the best country. They also worship their sports teams, oh, we won in the World Cup or whatever. And one who goes to a holy place of pilgrimage just to take a bath rather than to take advantage of the enlightened association one will get there from advanced devotees is considered like a farm animal, like a cow or a donkey. So that's the verse I think Srila Prabhupada is saying here, that they think their body is themselves, they think their bodily connections with others is kinsmanship, the land which the body has obtained is their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to be ends in themselves, like taking a bath rather than actually getting enlightenment from the people in the holy tirthas. Social work, nationalism, and altruism are some of the activities for such materially designated persons. Under the spell of such designations, they're always busy in the material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they are not interested. Those who are enlightened in spiritual life, however, should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. Such bewildered persons may be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as nonviolence and similar materially benevolent work. Men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men, to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. So even though the acts of material welfare activities and trying to make the world a better place is actually ignorant if one's not doing it as one's prescribed duty for Krishna, but rather thinking themselves to be the doer. That's the verse 27 that I was going to read. We should get to that as how we're not the doer. We're not these bodies, and the activities of these bodies are also not our activities. And the solutions that we come up with for our problems in life based on engaging in material activities are not really solutions to the problems in life at all. But really what we are is we're the spirit soul. We have a role in this activity. That's explained in the 18th chapter when Krishna is summing all this knowledge up and saying that there's different factors of action. And because we're all like situated on these machines made of material nature, and we're thinking this is me, but really our body is just like our car, and we're driving the car based on our material desires, and Krishna's allowing it to go on. But what we should never forget is that we're not independent. We can't just take our car wherever we want to go. We need the sanction of Krishna to do anything. So we're not independent. So let me read verse 27, which was the... Yes, Kanka.
I just wanted to comment on the eye camps and the hospital and the feeding. One of the main projects that Srila Prabhupada wanted was to feed people, because we're feeding them Krishna Prasadam, which is not ordinary food. And then the other thing about the eye camps and the hospital is the same thing. It's called dovetailing the energy. So it's turning that kind of altruism and humanitarianism into Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, we're feeding Krishna Prasadam. But there's another part of on the other side of the argument. I appreciate both sides of the argument, but Prasadam, I don't actually remember where I read this, but I know that I heard it and it sounded correct to me, was that Prasadam, it's important how we prepare it, it's important how we offer it, it's important how we serve it, and it's important how we honor it. And all those things are part. So if in order to, I remember one time I asked Satsvarup Maharaj, why don't we just, if we take a little bit of Radhakund water, we can go to the reservoir that everybody drinks out of, that goes in all the tap water and everything. We can pour the Radhakund water into the reservoir, and it will turn the whole reservoir into Radhakund water. And then everybody, when they drink and they take a shower and everything, it's like better than the Ganges, and we could go do this. We could be, and nobody would know that we're actually making this great spiritual benefit for everybody. But it's important also for them so sometimes there are programs where devotees can give prasadam to schools, but because the secular government won't allow them to actually come into school and chant and say, we're all taking Krishna's prasadam now, they're serving it out in the school without any recognition of Krishna or how it's prasadam. There's some benefit to that, certainly, because it is prasadam, and that's really important. It would be better if we could...
ISKCON Time Bomb.
Yeah. ISKCON Time Bomb, the book, right? A book. You can give someone a book.
No, ISKCON Time Bomb is the prasadam, because then they eventually get a book. And then, that's the...
So there is sukriti that comes even agyata, even unknowingly. Someone may take some prasadam and not know anything about prasadam, and still he gets some benefit. Or you may approach him on the street and say, please look at this book, sir. And he says, I don't have much time, I'm not very interested. But he takes a look at it and he looks at a picture and he says, maybe later, and he goes away.
Just touch it.
Yes, he touches it, and then he goes away. But he's made some benefit. And Vaishesika instructs us that we should not harass them. Like if he says, maybe later, I don't have time, and he starts to walk away, we shouldn't chase him down the street and think, no, I'm going to force him to buy the book. Because if we do that, then he thinks, I don't like those Hare Krishna, and we've actually done the opposite. But he should think, oh, that gentleman met was very nice, and maybe someday I'll read that book. Then he's made a little progress, and eventually someday he'll become a devotee. So yes, that's another thing. People are saying we put on big festivals and lots of people come, but they come in a mood of enjoying spirit. In order to get them to come to the festival, we say, come and have fun, throw the holy colors, and chant Hare Krishna to the sounds of a musical kind of band that is more in tune with your musical taste, like rock and roll Hare Krishna chanting or something like that. And some people say, well, they're just coming in and enjoying spirit, and they're just thinking they're having a lot of fun, and how is this actually Krishna consciousness, But on the other hand, if they're taking prasadam, they're chanting the holy name, they're thinking, I like these Hare Krishnas, someday I'll try to understand the spiritual significance of why we're doing all this, but right now I think it's a lot of fun. Some of them will become devotees. So, we do a lot of festival programs, and a lot of people come, but maybe they don't all become devotees. We have to think as a society and practical, we have to think of how to arrange such things so that those who are qualified can actually become devotees. Yes, Kang, but I want to get on to the 27th,
okay,
so make
but
it
also
short,
all angles, like here we have people who are talented as rock and roll musicians, so they can use their talent in producing these wonderful festivals. Mm-hmm. So there's so many different angles and natures that are involved, and that was kind of what that verse was.
Yes.
To use it in Krishna's service.
Well, this purport is interesting, the one I just read, that it seems there's two different paragraphs, and they seem to be pointing in a slightly different direction. On the one hand, Prabhupada is saying, we shouldn't disturb people, we can engage them in morality. Like in the 12th chapter, the 12th chapter begins, Arjuna asks Krishna, what's better? Those who contemplate the impersonal absolute truth, or those who actually engage in devotional service in your personal form? And Krishna says, those who engage in devotional service to my personal form is better. That's better. They're most intimately united. That's my opinion, they're better. Absolutely. But he says the other ones, eventually, after a long period of time, they'll become devotees, and they'll come to me. So he says, but it's very difficult. But that process is very difficult to try to understand philosophically how matter is different from spirit, by negating all the things about matter, like form and personality and so forth, and come to this conclusion of being fixed in realization of the impersonal absolute truth is troublesome for embodied people, and one becomes attached to that conception. So when somebody tries to say, but actually here's some other information we're getting from great acharyas, great authorities like Narada Muni, they're describing that there's transcendental form and personality and devotional service in a world full of even greater bliss engaged in spiritual action beyond material nature. They find it difficult to give up, they're already attached to their impersonal conception. So Krishna says, one who actually thinks of me, who meditates on me, who is engaged in my devotional service, that person, I become the swift deliverer from the ocean of nescience, from the ocean of death. And he says, but other people, he says, what you should do is engage all your mind and intelligence in me and perform devotional service fully, completely fixed up. But if you can't do that, then abhyasa yoga, by the practice of abhyasa yogena tato mamit chaptum, by practicing the regulative principles, you can develop a desire for me. And then he says, but if you can't do that, then work for me. You know, we have a mission in the world to spread Krishna consciousness. It needs money, it needs help, it needs land, it needs labor. So contribute to that. Even if you can't even follow the principles, that's best. But if you can't do that, then give up your wealth. Be charitable. Don't be selfish. And try to be self-situated. Meditate. Study spiritual knowledge. There are these different things. So Srila Prabhupada is saying in the first paragraph of this verse 329, the purport, he's saying, we shouldn't disturb people who aren't ready to hear. Let them engage in charity then, right? They should give up some of their wealth, do something that's less selfish, especially if they can be engaged according to Vedic scripture. Let them be moral. Let them be moral people according to Vedic dharma. And they'll perform sacrifices and they'll worship different demigods, but in the course of that, they'll be also offering respects to Vishnu, and they'll associate with spiritual leaders, and they'll gradually become attracted to Krishna consciousness, and at least they won't go down by committing sinful activities and having bad karma and having to take birth as an animal. But in the second paragraph of that purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, but the devotees are kinder than Krishna. They actually take the risk to try to get somebody to be a devotee. Even though Krishna is saying, don't disturb them, let them go on with their mundane morality, and maybe they'll gradually say, no, but try to figure out a way, agitate your intelligence in such a way that you could figure out a way to engage people in devotional service. But I really want to get to verse 27, and appreciate all the comments. The verse goes like this, and do we have it on the board?
Yes.
Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. Prakritehe, of material nature, kriyamanani, being done, gunahi, by the modes, karmani, activities, sarvashaha, all kinds of, ahankara vimudha, bewildered by false ego, atma, the spirit soul, karta, doer, aham, I, iti, thus, manyate, he thinks. Translation, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Purport. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Hrishikesha, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. So people are actually thinking, if I don't get up in the morning and go to work, how will I be able to pay my bills? And then I will suffer. And they're thinking that I'm going up and I'm working and I'm struggling and I'm meeting with difficulties in the office, but I'm successfully doing that. And I went to the office birthday party and I think I made a good impression on the boss and the other, and therefore I'm maintaining my family. I'm going to get a raise and a promotion. And if I don't do that, I'll be in big trouble. If I do it right, I'll be successful. And all of these thoughts are without relation to how am I pleasing Krishna. So it's all Maya. That's really Maya. In fact, what he doesn't realize is that everything he's getting, his salary and the things he's able to buy with the salary and the things he's able to provide for his family, it's all really ultimately arranged by Krishna. Not that he should stop, not that we're saying, oh, you should just sit at home and watch television all day. No. That's also Maya, right? Or, you should just sit at home and chant Hare Krishna all day. Well, if you have that adhikar, if you can actually do that, you won't be the loser. Your family won't starve, and you won't be unhappy. But not everybody can do that either. So we're not saying quit your job, sell your car, cash in your bank account, move into the temple, give everything. Kanka knows that our generation of devotees in the 60s and 70s were preaching that people should do that, and we were doing that. Sell your car, quit your college, just move into the temple and go out and chant on the streets every day. And that will make your life perfect. And we weren't the losers. We were immeasurably the gainers, the winners by doing that. But it's not that everyone should do that or can do that. And certainly if you have a family, you have a family responsibility. You can't be irresponsible. But if you're totally dedicated to Krishna, that fulfills all your responsibilities. Magically, it will all your responsibilities will be fulfilled. But Krishna didn't want Arjuna to go live in a temple. He wanted Arjuna to fight the battle and to be a good prince and help administer the government with his brother. Do you guys have any questions or any thoughts about what is it? Is it making any sense, or what's the reaction? I'm afraid it's boring, huh? I haven't made it relevant. What do you think about about Bhagavad Gita and stuff? You can say something. Mm-hmm. We have to get things to make it interesting. Actually, this whole Mahabharata is very interesting. People like to go hear about romance and action. People like action movies where somebody's in a fight and they're shooting weapons and things like that. But Vyasadeva has given us these stories that have all those elements, but also make us spiritually realized. Yes, Prabhu.
Regarding this verse, is it true if I say that whatever money we are getting, whatever happiness we are getting, and also whatever distress we are getting, everything is already arranged based on the result, based on our work in the previous lives, and it's not really the result of the hard work we have done in the current life, like studying, going to the schools, studying hard, or working hard in some company.
It's a remarkable thought, isn't it? But actually, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says just that, and Prahlad Maharaj says just that we've been born because of what we've done already, previously. We've been born with a particular body and a particular fate and a destiny, and we can't increase the amount of happiness we're going to have or the amount of suffering we're going to have by our activities. But it doesn't mean, so therefore I'll just lay down and be lazy and somehow or another that'll be good. We don't know what our fate will be, and we may find that someone lays down and acts lazy and then loses his home, loses his everything, becomes a homeless person, becomes addicted to alcohol and lives in a homeless shelter or something like that. But we shouldn't think it's because, we should understand that it was his karma that to do that. It wouldn't be our karma actually to do that. That's not the kind of body we have. It's not the kind of mind we have. It's not the kind of personality we have to do something like that. But actually it's a fact that we think that by all our activities and all our work, we're becoming materially successful and that will make us materially happy. But actually, we can't increase our material happiness even one bit by changing our activities. It's actually when we stop seeking the material happiness and we start seeking spiritual happiness that we'll find we get all the happiness and everything we need. But we should perform our duties. But it may not be our duty, or it may not be in our best interest to become very wealthy or to have a lot of property. Especially if we get property and wealth by evil deeds. Okay, Hare Krishna, sorry I couldn't make it more interesting this time. We don't want to force anyone. If we can, people think, oh, I'll trick someone and I'll lie and cheat and then I'll get a lot of money and then I'll have all that money, and with the money I can do what I want and enjoy happiness. But actually, the ill-gotten money like that is actually very bad for us, and it's very bad for our fate and for our destiny. And there really is we talk about the law of karma. There really is a law of karma. The material scientists don't know about it. They know about the law of, gravity and Newton's laws of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the laws of thermodynamics, and so many different Boyle's gas law, and different relationship of different things of how matter and energy work in the world. But they don't know how our psychology and our destiny works to make us happy individuals or unhappy individuals. And it's actually a fact that we won't actually increase our material happiness by, hard work and thrift, or by pious work. Krishna's talking to Arjuna. He's from a higher civilization where they're not just considering hard work and thrift is the motto of someone like Benjamin Franklin. He was, I don't know if you guys have heard of Benjamin Franklin. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. He was part of the Continental Congress, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention. I think, and he was an inventor, and he was a self-made person. He was born in a poor family, but he became a publisher and a thinker. Hare Krishna. And he published a periodical called Poor Richard's Almanac, and it had all these sayings in it, like, a penny saved is a penny earned. And if early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Right, this is an idea of how to make material success by being working correctly and not falling prey to vice. Don't start drinking and don't start gambling and these other things. And we see practically people who have good habits, they're regulated in their habits, they rise early, and they don't waste time, they're effective people. They also seem to be happy because those are people that are influenced more in the modes of goodness and passion rather than passion and ignorance.
He was a vegetarian too.
Oh, so Benjamin Franklin was a vegetarian, apparently, Kanka says. He was, anyway, but Arjuna is coming from a higher civilization that also knows that one should satisfy the sages and the demigods by performance of Vedic, observance of Vedic rituals and ceremonies. But Krishna is saying, not even that won't make you happy, ultimately. It might make you gradually advance. But the Vedas, Krishna says, Yamimang pushpitang vachang pravadantya vipaschitaha. Those who are not fully knowledgeable, they're attracted by the flowery verses of the Vedas. Kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishvarya gating prati. They engage their followers in various rituals in order to get material wealth and happiness. Janma karma palang prada. They're preaching that this is the way to get happiness by getting a better birth and getting the fruits of work. And they say that there's nothing more than this. Krishna says, Veda vadaratak partha nanyadastiti vadinaha. That they say that that's what the goal of life is. By being a moral person, a good person, working properly. There's a philosophy, in the Vedas there's 6 philosophies, one of them is called karma mimamsa. And the philosophy is that if you work properly, then you'll get good results. So you don't have to worry about whether the demigods and Krishna are pleased with you or not, because they're forced to give you the results of your activity according to the way nature works. So if you're a good person and you perform the rituals properly, you can induce the demigods to give you the wealth and the so forth. But they think that's the goal, to get wealth and material happiness. But it's not the goal. The real goal is love. The real goal is to actually make Krishna happy. And so if you're thinking that you don't have to worry about the demigods and Krishna and the higher powers because you can get the results of your work, then you're never going to get anything worthwhile. You're only going to get material results, which aren't really worthwhile from the higher perspective of things. And at least, if you work correctly, at least you won't go to hell and be an animal. You'll become a Brahmin in your next life, a better, more pure person. You'll become a demigod for some time and then come back to earth and so forth. But Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, they're coming and going. Gata gatang kama kaman labhante. The Trividyamang somapaputa papa jagyairishva swargating prartayante te punyama asadya shurendra lokam ashnanti divyan divideva bhogan. That they can, by performing these sacrifices, they can drink soma rasa and go to the planet of King Indra and enjoy great heavenly delights. But then, tangte, well anyway, kshine punye martya lokang vishanti. Tante bhuktva swarga lokang vishalang kshine punye martya lokang vishanti. When their good karma is over, they've used it up and they have to come back into the world of death. They think, the planets of Indra, that's the land of the immortals, because they live for 10,000 years by calculation of the demigods, maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years by human calculation. But it's not eternal. something you've earned it in your pious karma bank account, and when it's used up, you have to come back and become a human, and you're no better off than you were before. But if you get a little Krishna consciousness, that's always eternal. And so getting back to this verse, we're thinking that, and the question is related to this verse, we're thinking that we're doing things. I'm gaining wealth, I'm getting promoted, I'm building a nice house better than anybody else has built, I'm writing the great novel that's going to be a masterpiece, and I'm working feverishly to write this great novel or compose this great symphony. But actually, that's false ego. We're thinking, I'm doing. But without the ingredients, without the brain that Krishna has given us, without the strength that Krishna has given our bodies, without the opportunities. I think during the 2008 election, President Obama was trying to, or maybe this was before he was president, he was trying to become president, he was making a speech and he was trying to make a point that, even if you've become wealthy, you couldn't have become wealthy without the infrastructure, without good roads and trucks and banks that you could borrow money and you could do all these things. And he said, you didn't make that. He meant you didn't make the roads, you didn't make the libraries, you didn't make the educated employees that could come because they had a good, they all learned to read and write in school, in public schools and all this. So he was saying that, his idea was that the government has a part a role to play in the success of people. But he was quoted as saying, you didn't make that, as by conservatives who were saying that, I deserve what I got, and other people who don't have as much as me is because they're lazy and stuff. They thought he was saying that they shouldn't get any credit for the results of their work, and they got very offended, and they played that clip over again. You didn't make that, like, oh, you're a socialist and you only get what government gives you and there's no point to work hard. But the point is, we didn't make that. Whatever we got, if we are the most brilliant scientists and we came up with a solution to a very long, difficult problem that has bedeviled scientists for years, and then we found Isaac Newton found, the universal gravitation explains why the planets are orbiting the way they are, or whatever. But he didn't do it all by himself, and he would be the first to acknowledge it. He was a Christian and a religious person. But he didn't make that. It's not like he did it all himself. He was inspired. His intelligence was in such a way inspired by his nature. And when he got his nature, he got that particular nature, he was infused in that particular Isaac Newton body because of his previous works in his previous life. So nature, we're surrounded by nature. Our senses, our mind, all these things are not us, they are coverings of our real nature. And we're seated as though on a machine, Krishna says. Yantra rudhani mayaya, a machine made of Krishna's energy. And so we're not the doers of the activities, but Krishna is, yes, Shalabahu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
So I was thinking, the soul spirit, as a soul spirit, it is formless. It is within everybody, within every living being. So the doer is basically within me, within us. But not the ego or the mind or the body, but other than that, there is a doer as a spirit, as a soul within us.
Yes.
To realizing that...
Vedas say also, in this verse he's saying, Kartaham iti manyate, they think themselves the doer, but in other verses elsewhere in the Vedas and even in Bhagavad Gita, the soul is described as karta, the doer.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
So what I was saying is everything doing is the doer as a soul, as a spirit within us. It's a formless. To realizing within me and to realizing with every living being, there is a soul.
It's actually not formless.
Oh, okay. That's my question.
But
That is my
that's
question.
confidential, but
Yeah.
it's maybe in our material condition now, because we're so wrapped up in our material form, that it's better to think of the soul as a tiny particle, a spark. But when we become awakened to Krishna consciousness, we'll also become awakened to our spiritual identity in a relationship with Krishna in one of the 5 primary rasas. And so we actually have a spiritual body. But that we've forgotten now. So we can think of ourselves, or we're described as, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita describes Dehino, the embodied. He doesn't give a lot of detail about the activities of the soul itself, other than to say, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. The activity of the soul is Yat Karoshi, Yat Ashnashi, Yat Juhoshi, Dadasi, Yat whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give in charity, Yat Tapassasi, whatever austerity you perform, do it for me. But actually,
Was there a time when I did not exist nor you nor all these kings? So he's really telling the
yeah,
individuality.
yes, he's saying that they're individual. Prabhupada points out, Rakanka is saying, she didn't have the microphone, but she's quoting the verse, Natvevahang jatu nasang natwang neme janadipa. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future will any of us cease to be. So Srila Prabhupada points out that Krishna is giving first person, second person, third person, and is giving past, present, and future tense. You could think of it grammatically. And he's saying that it's not, as some people say, that right now we're thinking of ourselves as separate individuals, but when we become enlightened, we'll realize that we're all that one thing and we'll cease to exist as individuals. But Krishna is not teaching that. He says we actually have an eternal individual relationship. Also, Arjuna asked him, how did you explain this to the sun god when he's older than you? And Krishna said, both you and I have gone through many, many births, but I can remember them all, but you can't. So Arjuna was there, present, when Krishna was talking to the sun god. Arjuna has been present in many, many times. So we actually do have a spiritual body, and we have spiritual senses. Srila Prabhupada points out in the 6th chapter also that even the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali refer to spiritual senses, that in Samadhi one can actually perceive the Atma by his own spiritual senses. So there's such a thing as a spiritual body as well.
Yes, one of the things stuck with me, I was reading this Ishopanishad recently.
Ishopanishad.
Yes, one of that mantra saying that Tadu andarasya sarvasya Tadu sarvasya bhakyata. So he is within us, and he is with everything else, and he is everywhere else, within and outside too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's him.
Mm-hmm.
As a soul, it is become him then. Am I right? That's my question.
Well, we don't become him, no. Yeah, we are part of him, and he's the soul of us in a way, just like we're the soul of the body. So the super soul is the soul of the soul. So he's the Atma. Without Hrishikesha, without the Lord of the senses, then our senses won't work. Our mind won't work. He's the predominating deity of the different mind, intelligence, senses, and so forth. Aniruddha is predominating deity of mind. Pradyumna is predominating deity of intelligence, and so forth. But we have a role as karta, as the doer. We have a role, and that role is, in the spiritual world, that role is that we're actually engaged in devotional service. In the material world, that role is described by Srila Prabhupada with the phrase, man proposes and God disposes, which means that we're thinking we're doing what we're doing, we're getting what we're working very hard for some result. So we're desiring that result in the course of those activities. And because of those desires, Krishna's arranging for us to get results. And because of the way we've achieved those results, he's also arranging us to get future. So we're actually, to get in the future, the results, the reactions to what we've done. in the material world, everybody's competing with everybody to be the chief, to be the top, to be God, to be, the controller of everyone. And everybody wants to be in a higher position and no one wants to be in a lower position. Actually, in the spiritual world, it's opposite. Everyone wants to serve everyone else. But everyone's so pure there that no one will take advantage of you. Sometimes we see in our Hare Krishna temple, somebody comes with a nice humble service mentality, and they're very sweet, and they want to serve everyone else. And then somebody else may take advantage of that, and if you don't protect yourself, you might get hurt. So you should be sweet, but you should also be careful. But in the spiritual world, nobody will take advantage of anyone, and everyone wants to serve like that. So in the material world, we're the doer because we have desires. We're not really the soul doer because there's these other factors of action. There's the place, the senses, the performer, the doer, the soul, the endeavor, and ultimately there's divine arrangement, Daivi. There's Krishna. Without the super soul's permission, nothing happens. The super soul everyone is competing against each other, and the super soul is letting them compete. Sometimes one person wins, and sometimes the other person wins. One person subdues one other person, and then the victim later gets to subdue the perpetrator. But none of them are achieving happiness. They're all struggling and achieving only what Prahlad Maharaj calls chewing the chewed.
Because it is in the material platform.
Yes.
And the nature of the material platform, there is no satisfaction because
Right.
it's more and more and more.
Right.
Unfortunately, you are going away from the spiritual realization when you are seeking or engaging to the material.
He's looking for satisfaction where it doesn't exist, in material things. Looking for love in all the wrong places. The real love is to love Krishna, and that's very easy. Even a poor man can find a flower or fruit and offer it with love if he has that love of Krishna. And that's the perfection of life. So you don't have to become very rich to be a successful person. But if you become very rich and you're a devotee, you can do a great big service. Just like our Ambarish Das, Prabhupada's disciple Ambarish Das, he gave millions of dollars to help build this big temple in Mayapur that they're building now, the temple of the Vedic planetarium. He's given some because Prabhupada gave him that order, and he's intelligent. So many rich people are there, but most of them are wasting their money on different habits. George Harrison loved to drive fancy sports cars, He was a devotee, but he still had some habits, People will want to do. They'll have who is it? Richard Branson or whatever. He likes to, wants to break the world record for who can be the first person to circumambulate the world in a lighter than air balloon or something like that. And they spend their human life on these endeavors which they consider very important, and they're not thinking, well, how does it please Krishna?
George Harrison also gave the manor, the
He did,
Bhaktivedanta
yeah.
manor, and he also helped Prabhupada print the first book, Krishna book.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing George Harrison. Prabhupada said in the Nectar of Instruction that there was an English musician who, Prabhupada he mentioned him, which is, not very many people get mentioned in Prabhupada's books, but Prabhupada he was mentioning George Harrison as an example of a neophyte devotee who should be respected in one's mind. But because he wasn't an initiated devotee, the initiated devotee you should bow down to, pay your obeisances to. Maybe later he became initiated, I don't know, but and even
told
then,
him he didn't have to be initiated, that he would take care of him, and on his deathbed.
Okay, I don't want this to be a class about George Harrison. I'm sorry, I was just mentioning that rich people sometimes do things like ride in race cars and spend money on those different things. And I'm not criticizing George Harrison in the slightest. He's very dear to Prabhupada.
To get back to that, Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he was a Kshatriya, and his purpose was to fight. And although at the time he was becoming weak, Krishna was telling him all this knowledge so that he would do his duty and fight no matter what was the results of that. So that was, to me, that's like the bottom line of this verse.
And ultimate duty is to surrender to Krishna also, not just to do your duty socially, but to understand Krishna and your relationship with Krishna and become his instrument. What is it? Savyasachi, nimitta matram bhava savyasachi. Do what Krishna wants you to do and just become like an extension of Krishna's will in the world. And in Arjuna's case, what Krishna wanted him to do was to fulfill this role as being a member of the royal order who inherited the empire. The Rajasuya sacrifice was done before, and King Yudhishthira should actually be the emperor of the world. And that's there. So we're the doers in the sense that Krishna is, as super soul, he's reacting to our desires. Man proposes and God disposes. He's the witness, he's the overseer, he's the permitter. But for the devotee who actually wants to please Krishna and see Krishna in his personal form as in a relationship, then Krishna doesn't stay in the background as just someone who's arranging and watching everything, but he comes forward and says, this is what I want, this is what I like, there's a personal relationship, and there's a great deal of rasa there, there's a great deal of bliss that's experienced even in the mood of servitorship that's not experienced by those who are simply contemplating the absolute truth in the mood of neutrality and seeing Krishna as really a person, but they don't have yet an active relationship that way. So for the materialist, we're the doer in the sense that we're on this machine and we don't know it, and we don't know how the machine is working, and we have these desires, and we're trying to achieve those desires by the activities of our bodies, and as a result we're becoming more and more implicated, and we're getting some results because of Krishna's arranging for us to get some results, but not in the way we think, and we actually get the opposite result of what we really want, and we get more and more bound in illusion and forgetfulness. Whereas if we become devotees of Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, purify our hearts, and hear Bhagavad Gita, hear Srimad Bhagavatam from realized personalities in the association of devotees, then we naturally become the actual doers, because we can serve Krishna to our heart's content in accordance. We are always in nature. We're very small. There's two kinds of, there's many. Krishna has parasya shakti vividhaiva shriyate. He has many, many different energies. And we, the living jivas, are one of Krishna's energies. We're called tatastha shakti. We're marginal energy. And marginal means that it can be either situated in yoga maya or in internal energy, or it can be situated, we really belong to internal energy, para prakriti. We belong in Krishna's spiritual energy, daivi shakti, but we can also be situated in Krishna's material energy. And it's all Krishna's energy, so it's all actually real. What's not real is our perception of it. And our perception when we're in ahankara, we're thinking, I am material energy, and I will acquire material energy, and that will be for my benefit. But when we're in spiritual enlightenment, Krishna consciousness, we're thinking, I am servant of Krishna, and I'm using just like this material energy is consisting of three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So similarly, the spiritual world is consisting of three spiritual modes called hladini, sandini, and samvit. And we're situated in that spiritual energy using the facilities there for service of Krishna. The difference is that in spiritual energy, nothing decays, there's no inebriety there, nothing is contaminated or impure. Everything there is perfectly pure and very, very, very happy. Millions of times happier than we can imagine. So when we chant Hare Krishna, as Kanka was saying, this is the process for this age. And when we chant Hare Krishna, like we'll be doing in a couple of minutes, we experience, we directly, personally experience that kind of happiness, a little bit, a glimpse of that bhava that is relished steadily, constantly, and in increasing unlimited amounts by spiritual success, adepts, successful spiritual devotees who've become perfect in yoga. Yes, Prabhu Shalabahu.
Please tell me one more time that three energy of the spiritual energy.
Say again, I didn't even hear with the microphone.
Would you mind to please explain, tell one more time that three forms of spiritual energy?
Yes, so the three spiritual, in the spiritual world, there's Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So Sat means eternal existence, and that's Sandhini energy. Lord Balaram, Anantasesha, Krishna's paraphernalia, Krishna's clothes, his bedstead, his, the things that are existence in the spiritual world is Sandhini. Sangvit means Chit, it means consciousness, it means knowledge, free from ignorance. Knowledge is the opposite of ignorance. In the material world, our knowledge is clouded by ignorance, but spiritual knowledge is perfect, and when one become a perfect devotee, one automatically knows whatever one needs to know. There's no ignorance clouding their perception. And Hladini means Ananda, means bliss. It means the bliss of the relationship that devotees have with Krishna. The spiritual world is saturated with that, especially the intimate world of Krishna's pastimes in Goloka. And Radharani is known as the Hladini Shakti. So we'll stop there. Jai Radhe.